here and start taking care of the German machine guns, which they do. So all of this town, everything that goes through there, ended up, so imagine there's, like for example, if we look here, right in there. Obviously these houses have all been reconstructed and stuff because of the destruction 100 years ago. But we can imagine a scenario where there's snipers and machine guns and up in here, hidden all over the place. And Frank Narcisse Jerome and his crew are the ones that emptied or cleared the town. So there's a plaque there. And I'll just give you a quick thing there. This is part of what it says. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Part of what it says the capture of Saint-Les-Maquions, that's the name of the town, Saint-Les-Maquions, was a tactical masterpiece at the center of the Battle of the Canal du Nord, one of the most complex operations of the Great War. And Frank Narcisse Jerome was right in the middle of her. So, the guy from here. For his actions that day, Frank Narcisse Jerome was now Frank Narcisse Jerome MM 2 bars. Remembering again that when you receive a military medal, they don't give you another one, they just keep adding bars. Now to give you an idea how exceptional this is, in the Canadian military history, there are only 38 Canadians have been awarded. There's only 38 Canadians had that in all the military history of this country. 38. First Nations, 2. So that was, and these are actions that occurred in September of 1918. So the war ended in November of 1918. Essentially, for the rest of the war, things went relatively smoothly for Frank Narcisse Jerome. After that, as far as the war went, there, it was basically the Germans were retreating faster than they could keep up with them. And just one quick thing about him: he ended up, poor fella, he survives all of this relatively unscathed there, and he catches back then there was a Spanish flu epidemic. Right after the end of the First World War, there was a thing called the Spanish flu epidemic, just a really bad flu epidemic. He was hospitalized for 4 months. So he didn't even get to come back to Canada with his comrades, his buddies. They had to stay back in the hospital and heal up a little bit. And so that's this is Francis Pegumagabo. Francis Pegumagabo is the other First Nation soldier who's in the same category as far as decorated for bravery. You'll notice this medal here, right there. That's MM 2 bars, right there. These other medals are, one of them is the British War Medal, one of them is the Victory Medal, and that's the 14-15 Star, that's the British War Medal, and that's the Victory Medal. And he came back, Francis Pegumagabo comes back, and history treated him a little bit differently than Frank Narcisse Jerome. We know now that Frank Narcisse Jerome has been sort of largely forgotten. Whereas things were a little different with Pegumagabo. He ends up coming back. He was celebrated in his own community. He became the chief of this community. He also became a political activist for First Nations causes. He went to Ottawa. He protested in front of Parliament. The whole bit. He was a well-known guy. He died in the early 60s. We'll have to Google exactly when he died there. But he lived a relatively long life, and he was well-recognized, well-respected soldier. This is a statue that they have for him in Parry Sound, Ontario. Look at that, pretty impressive statue. The difference between Francis Pegumagabo and Frank Narcisse Jerome is Frank Narcisse Jerome was a Lewis gunner. Pegumagabo was a sniper. But there's a building named after Pegumagabo in Canadian Forces, Borden, Ontario, the largest Canadian Forces base in the country. They have a building named after him. Okay, in the military there's a symbol called the Eagle Staff. The Eagle Staff represents First Nations. And there's the official Canadian Forces Eagle Staff, which is decorated with different elements from different provinces and different territories and things like that. But there are also other Eagle Staffs. Certain communities have their own. And Francis Pegumagabo has his own. That's it right there. His community got together and made a an eagle staffer. And this is Frank Narcisse Jerome. Frank Narcisse Jerome was buried in the old cemetery here. However, there is a headstone for him in the new or the current cemetery, if you will. He's buried there. A couple things, while I have you here, people with some influence, a couple things with this. First of all, it should have, first of all, it's in French. I'm not sure about French. The second thing is it should be F. Narcisse Jerome MM2. That's important. To me, anyway. No, not just me. It's important to other people. Anyway, so he's, they have a headstone there. Frank Narcisse Jerome, make a long story. I'm not going to get into the whole details of how he died, but he ends up, he didn't live very long after the end of the First World War. He comes back, like I said, he had pneumonia, not pneumonia, the flu. Comes back, he ends up dying 16 years later, 1934. He had pardon me, he had 5 daughters. However, when he died, his family, the daughters were sort of scattered. So we lost, essentially, track of him. We don't have a picture of him, we don't know where the medals are, we don't know any direct descendants. Obviously, he has direct descendants. He had 5 daughters. There's a good chance that there's a great-grandson and great-granddaughter somewhere. But we don't know where that is. So that'll be a project for somebody at some point.
Well, I think there's that thing was a couple of kids he had that lived in Montreal after the mother took them to just their kids used to live with Alma Fichier. She was taking care of them, and after that the mother came down because he ended up getting divorced, and then they took off to Montreal, and we never heard of them anymore until last year when we were doing it, there's a lady from Ganawagi that called me, and she said that they have a trace of that man because they were trying to get I think that soldiers used to get the veterans' kids used to get some funding or something like that, but we don't know where he or she is still alive.
So that's Frank Narcisse Jerome. Milton Gideon, we know Milton Gideon, he came back and became a police officer, lived a long, happy life. Alexander Jerome, he comes back as well, and he volunteers again for the Second World War. And somewhere in the Military Museum in Richmond, there's a picture of Alexander Jerome Sr. I have to find, now that I'll have to find this picture for you. It's a really good picture. He's in full regalia at the Legion. And he's standing, he's talking. So it's a pretty cool picture. There's all the veterans in the Legion. They're all dressed in some kind of an event there. That's pretty cool. So there you go. So next time you drive by the cenotaph there, just think about some of the things that you may have learned today. I want to thank you.
Yeah, and the flag that you see here, it was donated by CHRT radio stations. That time we, with Michael, me, Veronica, Doug, we all got together. We wanted to do something special to our veterans because nobody talked about them, nobody even wrote anything out there, just like nurses, like they were forgotten. So we decided we were going to do that, and it cost us over almost 4,000 to get that from the United States, and I think that was from Alma's brother that had that made. All that stuff that you see, that mount, it's all was Nelson and Roger that donated it. But nurses end up being a sergeant, right?
Yes.
Yeah. From private to sergeant. Now that's a big, I think that was just within 2 years, right?
100 years ago too, like we consider what society was like 100 years ago. I think it's quite exceptional. Plus, I mean, just think what I just told you, that all those things you did. Yeah. So anyway, so next time you drive by there, just have a little thought to these guys. So thank you very much.